There's always a carbon signature on our steel, but there wasn't any carbon whatsoever that was found in this particular material.
This object may be as old as 140 million years. And obviously, that's a crazy proposition if you think that modern-day archaeology suggests.
Archaeologists keep unearthing objects that simply shouldn't exist. A tool sealed inside ancient stone, an artifact in Mexico that looks unmistakably Roman, and a sacred bowl in South America carved with writing that belongs on the other side of the world. Each of these discoveries defies logic, challenges science, and forces us to question everything we thought we knew about history. Join us as we uncover 6 ancient finds that experts still struggle to explain, and the mysteries only get stranger with each one. Number 6. The London Hammer. Mystery and history don't just rhyme, they're deeply intertwined threads woven into the fabric of human existence. So, let's dive into some fascinating discoveries where these two worlds collide. If you're a Marvel fan, you've probably seen Thor swinging his mighty hammer Mjolnir like it's nobody's business. But what if you're told there's a real-life hammer that has baffled historians and scientists for decades? Well, meet the London Hammer, and no, it doesn't summon lightning, but it does come with a mystery worthy of a superhero movie. Our story begins in London, Texas, back in 1936. Max Hahn and his wife were out for a simple hike along Red Creek. Nothing unusual, just a couple enjoying nature, until they stumbled across something odd, a small rock with a piece of wood sticking out of it. Naturally, curiosity took over, and they decided to take the strange rock home. At first glance, it didn't seem like much, but little did they know they were holding what would later be called the London Hammer, or as some prefer, the London Artifact. Years later, sometime around 1946 or 47, Max's son George broke open the rock. Inside, they found the rest of the object, a hammerhead made of metal. Imagine the shock. A tool, seemingly modern, locked inside solid rock. The hammer itself isn't massive, just about 6 inches long, with a hammerhead about 1 inch in diameter. Its design? Pretty ordinary, resembling a typical 19th century mining hammer. In other words, it's not some ancient alien weapon or relic of a forgotten civilization. So where's the mystery? It's all about how the hammer ended up encased in rock. At first glance, it looks like the hammer had been trapped inside ancient stone for millions of years, way older than humans could have made it. Fast forward to 1983, when the hammer caught the attention of Carl Baugh, a creationist who purchased it for his Creation Evidence Museum. Baugh believed this wasn't just an old tool, it was proof of a pre-flood world, possibly dating back to the time of Noah's Ark. He went even further, suggesting that the atmospheric conditions of Earth before the biblical flood allowed for giants to roam the land. According to this theory, the London Hammer could have belonged to one of these legendary beings. Pretty wild, right? As it turns out, you don't need a global flood or giants to explain this mystery. Geologists pointed out that rock concretions like the one encasing the hammer can form much faster than you'd think. The hammer could have been left in a limestone-rich area where water carried dissolved minerals. Over time, those minerals built up around the hammer, hardening into rock. This process could take just a few decades or maybe a couple of centuries, not millions of years. In other words, the hammer wasn't trapped in ancient stone from the dawn of time. It probably fell into a crevasse or got left behind by a miner, and nature did the rest. Still, it's easy to see why this little hammer has captured people's imaginations. The image of a seemingly modern tool locked inside ancient rock is just too tempting not to speculate about. Number 5. Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head. While the London Hammer has fascinated archaeologists and the likes for decades, the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head has continued to turn heads also. Well, just when we think we've figured out the timeline of human civilization, something strange pops out of the ground and flips the narrative on its head, literally in this case. In 1933, deep in the Toluca Valley of Mexico, about 65 kilometers northwest of Mexico City, a team of archaeologists unearthed a discovery that would ignite decades of debate. It wasn't a grand temple or a trove of glittering gold, though plenty of those were found nearby. Instead, it was a small terracotta head, unassuming in size, but massive in its implications. The problem? It didn't look like anything from the Aztec world or other Mesoamerican cultures. Its style, with its realistic facial features, hair, and beard, seemed unmistakably Roman. Yes, Roman, as in the empire that ruled Europe 2,000 years ago. The excavation was led by José García Payón, a respected Mexican archaeologist. While digging beneath a pyramidal structure, his team uncovered a burial site, sealed beneath 3 intact floors. The grave goods they found were typical of a high-status burial: gold, copper, turquoise, rock crystal, jet, shells, and pottery. And then there was it, the tiny terracotta head. At first, Payan didn't know what to make of it. The artifact seemed so out of place that he made a bold decision. He kept quiet. For nearly 3 decades, he said nothing about the mysterious head, likely fearing ridicule or accusations of fraud. It wasn't until 1960 that he finally published his findings, setting off a storm of controversy in the archaeological world. And controversy there was. Some scholars were intrigued, others outraged. How could an artifact that looked so unmistakably Roman be buried in a Mexican grave that predated Hernán Cortés and the Spanish conquest? The most dramatic explanation was also the most exciting. Maybe Romans had reached the Americas long before Columbus. One of the leading voices behind this theory is Romeo H. Hristov, an archaeologist at the University of New Mexico. Hristov, along with Santiago Genovese of Mexico's National Autonomous University, took a close look at the artifact. In 2001, they concluded that the head wasn't a colonial-era fake. In fact, based on stylistic analysis, it appeared to be a genuine Roman artifact from the 2nd or 3rd century AD, during the time of the Severian emperors. Bernard Andrea, a leading Roman art expert and director emeritus of the German Institute of Archaeology in Rome, agreed wholeheartedly. Even scientific testing backed up its ancient origins. In 1995, a thermoluminescence test conducted in Germany dated the head to somewhere between the 9th century BC and the mid-13th century AD, placing it firmly in the pre-Columbian era. With these results, the idea of a Roman artifact being present in ancient Mexico suddenly didn't seem so far-fetched. But how did it get there? Hristov proposed a daring theory. Perhaps a Roman, Phoenician, or Berber ship was blown off course and ended up wrecked near the shores of Mesoamerica. The artifact could have washed ashore or been carried inland through trade networks. There is some precedent for this. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of Roman and Phoenician activity in the Canary Islands, including settlements dating back as far as the 5th century BC. If they could reach the Canaries, it's not too wild to imagine a storm pushing a ship farther west, maybe even all the way to the Americas. Another possibility involves the Vikings, who we know reached North America around 1000 AD. Vikings loved collecting exotic goods from their travels, and they might have carried Roman artifacts across the Atlantic. Over generations, the item could have been traded or passed down, eventually making its way to central Mexico. It's a fascinating theory, but frustratingly, there's no direct evidence to back it up. Not everyone is ready to believe in ancient transoceanic contact. Some researchers argue that the whole thing might just be a practical joke gone too far. According to archaeologist Paul Schmidt, one of Payan's colleagues, a member of the excavation team named Hugo Moedano might have planted the Roman head at the site as a prank. Schmidt even claimed that Payan wasn't present during the entire dig, leaving open the possibility that he'd been fooled. However, Payan's son strongly disputes this, insisting his father was on site when the artifact was unearthed. With all the key players long deceased, it's now impossible to confirm or deny this theory. Still, some scholars see the hoax explanation as the simplest answer. After all, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. There's also a less sensational, but still intriguing, possibility. The head could have been brought to Mexico after European contact, during the early exploration period. The burial itself dates to 1476-1510 AD, right before the Spanish conquest. While it predates Cortés's arrival, there's a narrow window where a European artifact could have slipped into the region through trade or early voyages. The problem with this theory is the burial's pristine condition. The 3 layers of flooring above it were completely intact, with no signs of later disturbance. This makes it unlikely that the grave was tampered with after it was sealed. The Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head challenges our understanding of the past. For centuries, historians have taught that the Old World and New World were isolated until 1942. This little terracotta head whispers that maybe, just maybe, that story isn't quite complete. Today, the head sits quietly in a museum, its blank terracotta face offering no answers. Was it a relic from a Roman shipwreck, a Viking heirloom, an early European trade item, or simply an elaborate prank? We may never know for certain. But the mystery of the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head keeps historians, archaeologists, and curious minds around the world asking questions. And in a way, that's the real treasure, a tiny artifact that continues to spark wonder, centuries after it was buried beneath the ancient soil of Mexico. Number 4. Ubaid lizard figurines. If the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head is soiled in mystery, then the Ubaid lizard figurines is rooted in it, so deep one will literally have to dig the entire earth out to find their true meanings. Long before the towering ziggurats of Ur touched the Mesopotamian sky, or the Epic of Gilgamesh was etched into clay tablets, there lived a people whose story was quieter, subtler, but just as important. These were the Ubaid, a culture that thrived between 5,500 and 3,800 BCE, long before history officially began. They didn't leave us dramatic tales of kings and wars. Instead, they laid the groundwork for civilization itself. The Ubaid were masters of water and earth, bending the wild Tigris and Euphrates rivers to their will. They dug canals, irrigated fields, and turned arid land into thriving green pastures. Without their early experiments in agriculture and urban planning, the later glory of the Sumerians might never have been possible. But alongside their impressive feats of survival and engineering, the Ubaid left behind something stranger. Something that feels almost alien. Amid their ruined villages, places like Eridu and Tel el-Ubaid, archaeologists have uncovered small, handmade clay figurines. At first glance, they seem simple enough. But look closer, and you'll see why they've fascinated and unsettled researchers for nearly a century. The figures don't look entirely human. Their heads are elongated, their eyes almond-shaped, their faces smooth and almost reptilian. Some cradle infants with tender care, while others wear elaborate headdresses or hold what appear to be scepters. It's an eerie combination of the familiar and the strange. Humans shaped in the likeness of something otherworldly. These figurines were first brought to light in the 1920s by the famed archaeologist Leonard Woolley, who unearthed them during excavations at Ur and Eridu. Today, some of the most striking examples rest in the National Museum of Iraq. One haunting piece depicts a lizard-headed woman gently holding a child, her alien features softened by the deeply human act of nurturing. Another figurine, crowned with a patterned headdress, seems ready to preside over a mysterious ritual. These weren't random clay doodles. Their craftsmanship is deliberate, their symbolism powerful. But what exactly did they mean to the people who made them? Scholars have wrestled with this question for decades, and while we may never know for sure, several compelling theories have emerged. Many figurines feature exaggerated breasts or depict mothers holding children. This suggests they might have been tied to fertility rituals. In a world where survival hinged on successful crops and healthy families, fertility was sacred. These figures could have been used to invoke divine blessings for bountiful harvests, safe pregnancies, and the continuation of the community. The reptilian traits may not have been literal at all. Instead, they could represent deities or supernatural beings. Later Mesopotamian myths often feature serpents and dragons as symbols of both creation and chaos. Perhaps the Ubaid worshipped an early serpent deity tied to the life-giving waters of their rivers, a reminder that those same rivers could flood and destroy as easily as they nurtured. The headdresses and scepters seen on some figurines certainly hint at divine or priestly status. Unlike the Sumerians who came after them, the Ubaid never developed writing, so their beliefs and myths remain locked in silence. These figurines are some of the only clues we have to their worldview. What we do know is that the Ubaid were innovators. Their irrigation systems supported growing populations and allowed villages to flourish. Their painted pottery, decorated with precise geometric patterns, shows an appreciation for beauty beyond mere utility. They were already experimenting with hierarchical social structures, as seen in their temples and communal spaces. Piece by piece, they laid the foundations for the grand Mesopotamian civilizations that followed. Even the very idea of the temple as the heart of a city began with them. By the time the Sumerians rose to prominence, the Ubaid culture had faded into memory, yet their influence remained, woven into the myths and traditions of the land. Perhaps the reptilian figures didn't vanish entirely, but instead evolved into new symbols and gods, their original meaning hidden beneath layers of myth. The Ubaid never wrote their story, but in these figurines you can almost hear a whisper of it, the splash of river water in a newly dug canal, the hum of ritual songs beneath a desert sky, and the quiet breath of a people daring to imagine their place in a vast and mysterious cosmos. Number 3. The Shigir idol. When you think of the world's oldest surviving art, you probably picture ancient stone carvings or cave paintings, not a wooden statue. After all, wood isn't exactly known for its ability to stand the test of time. But deep in the Ural Mountains of Russia, buried in a soggy peat bog for thousands of years, something remarkable survived: the Shigir idol, the oldest known wooden sculpture on Earth. This towering 9-foot-tall totem pole, covered in intricate carvings and mysterious faces, is so ancient that it predates Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids by a lot. While Stonehenge dates back about 5,000 years and the pyramids around 4,500 years, the Shigir idol was carved an astonishing 12,500 years ago. That's more than twice as old. The story of this incredible artifact begins back in 1890, when gold prospectors were working in the Russian Urals. Instead of striking it rich with gold, they stumbled upon something far more valuable to history: a strange wooden figure preserved at the bottom of a peat bog. The idol was found in 10 separate pieces, later carefully reassembled to reveal a striking work of art, a towering figure with geometric carvings, human-like faces, and symbolic patterns etched along its surface. Even today, the statue has a haunting, almost otherworldly appearance, as though it's guarding secrets from a forgotten world. Well, the reason it survived so long is that the peat bog acted like a natural time capsule. Its oxygen-free, acidic environment slowed decay, protecting the wood for over 12 millennia, a miracle of preservation considering how quickly wooden objects usually rot away. When it was first studied, scientists thought the Shigir idol was impressive, but not that old. In 1997, radiocarbon dating placed its creation at around 9,500 years ago, already making it the oldest wooden artifact ever found. But even then, many researchers were skeptical. At the time, mainstream archaeology leaned heavily toward a Western-centric view of history, assuming that complex art and culture mostly developed in places like Mesopotamia or Egypt. The idea that hunter-gatherers living in the forests of the Urals could create such a sophisticated sculpture just didn't fit the narrative. Then came a game-changing study. In 2021, Thomas Terberger, a prehistory expert from Göttingen University in Germany, and his team reanalyzed the idol using advanced techniques. Their results stunned the scientific world. The Shigir idol was nearly 3,000 years older than previously thought. To put that in perspective, this statue was carved near the end of the last ice age, when early forests were spreading across Eurasia and humans were adapting to a rapidly changing world. The Shigir idol isn't just old, it's deeply mysterious. Its carvings include a series of abstract symbols and striking faces stacked one above the other. Archaeologists believe these designs had spiritual or ritual meaning, possibly connected to myths, cosmology, or the environment. What's especially fascinating is how this challenges long-held assumptions about hunter-gatherer societies. For decades, experts believed these groups mostly created simple art focused on hunting scenes or animal depictions, like those seen in cave paintings. But the Shigir idol suggests something far more complex. It hints at ritual practices, belief systems, and a symbolic worldview, ideas once thought exclusive to later farming civilizations like those in the Fertile Crescent. As Terberger explains, the idol may have been a way for people to cope with a world in transition. The climate was warming, forests were expanding, and old ways of life were shifting. Art like this could have been a tool to make sense of dramatic environmental change, just as myths and rituals do in cultures today. Most of what we know about ancient art comes from stone, bone, and cave paintings, materials that last much longer. This creates a huge bias in our understanding of the past. Imagine if the Shigir idol had decayed like countless others surely did. We might never have guessed that people 12,500 years ago were capable of creating something so intricate and symbolic. The Shigir idol stands as a rare window into a vanished world. Its very existence forces archaeologists to rethink how early human societies developed and how interconnected their spiritual and artistic lives may have been. It's humbling to think that long before the first pyramid rose or the first stone at Stonehenge was set in place, someone felled a massive larch tree, carefully carved its wood, and left behind a story we're only just beginning to unravel. Number 2. The Maine penny. While the Shigir idol has opened a window to a world we never imagined existed, the Maine penny has rewritten our understanding of history. Normally, when you think of the discovery of the Americas, the name that immediately pops into your head is probably Christopher Columbus. After all, he's been credited in history books for centuries as the guy who set sail in 1492 and accidentally bumped into a whole new world. But here's the twist. Columbus wasn't the first European to set foot in the Americas. That honor actually belongs to the Vikings, who were exploring parts of North America centuries before Columbus even dreamed of his famous voyage. This is known thanks to a mix of legend and evidence. The Vinland sagas, written in the 13th century, tell stories of Norse explorers venturing west and discovering a mysterious land full of resources they called Vinland. For a long time, people treated these sagas like tall tales. That changed in the 1960s when archaeologists uncovered the remains of a Viking settlement at Lonceau Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, proving that the Norse were indeed in North America around the year 1000 AD. But here's where things get even more interesting. Among the handful of possible Norse artifacts found in North America, there's one item that stands out for its uniqueness and its mystery: the Maine penny. On August 18, 1957, an amateur archaeologist named Guy Melgren was digging at a site called Goddard's Point, near Brooklyn, Maine.
There was a silver penny found at a place called the Goddard site.
The coin probably was also introduced to North America in that region, because we know that the Norse.
This area was once home to a Native American settlement and had been a hotspot for trading. Melgren wasn't expecting to rewrite history that day, but as fate would have it, he stumbled upon a small worn coin. At first, the find didn't seem like a big deal. For about 20 years, it sat largely unnoticed. It wasn't until 1974, when Melgren donated his collection, roughly 30,000 artifacts, to the Maine State Museum, that the coin finally caught the attention it deserved. Initially, experts thought it was just a regular 12th century English penny, possibly left behind by early English colonists. That theory made sense, until 1978, when specialists in London took a closer look. They weren't so sure anymore. The design looked different, suspiciously Norse, in fact. To solve the mystery, the coin was sent to Kolbjørn Skare, a leading expert on Norse coins at the University of Oslo. Skare's verdict shocked everyone. The coin was authentically Norse, minted sometime between 1065 and 1080 AD during the reign of King Olaf III of Norway. Here's where things get complicated.
A silver penny minted during the reign of Olaf the Quiet of Norway, who I believe was king from 1066 to about 1095 AD.
The Native American settlement at the Goddard site was active between 1180 and 1235 AD, about 100 years later. But coins like this one were known to circulate for centuries, so its presence in Maine technically fits the timeline. Still, one big question remained. How did a Norse coin end up in a Native American settlement in Maine? The Maine penny is the only confirmed Norse artifact found at the site. Despite extensive excavations in the 1970s, no other Viking-related objects were discovered. This suggests that Vikings themselves probably didn't travel all the way down the coast to Maine. Instead, the leading theory is that the coin arrived through trade. The Goddard site was a major hub in a vast Native American trading network. Other artifacts discovered there, like a Dorset Eskimo burin, support this idea. The penny even had a small hole drilled into it, suggesting it was worn as a pendant or ornament rather than used as currency. For the Native Americans who owned it, this strange foreign coin might have been seen as an exotic piece of jewelry rather than a piece of money. Of course, not everyone buys into the mystery. Some skeptics have argued that the Maine penny might be a hoax, deliberately planted to stir up controversy. After all, without meticulous archaeological records, something lacking during the 1957 dig, it's hard to completely rule out foul play. However, many experts defend the penny's authenticity. For one, Norse coins of this type are extremely rare and valuable, making it unlikely someone casually slipped it into the site just to cause confusion. Plus, Melgren himself didn't seem to realize what he had when he found it, which makes the hoax theory less convincing. The Maine penny remains one of the most intriguing puzzles in North American archaeology. Did it travel hundreds of miles through native trade routes? Was it evidence of direct Viking contact with Maine's coastline? Or is it simply an odd historical coincidence that we'll never fully understand? Whatever the truth, this tiny coin serves as a reminder that history is rarely straightforward. Columbus may get the spotlight, but the Vikings were exploring the Americas long before he arrived. Number 1. The Fuente Magna Bowl. While the Maine penny remains a puzzling piece, the Fuente Magna bowl is one of those artifacts that just shouldn't exist, yet there it is. Yeah, history has always had a way of throwing curveballs at us. Just when we think we've got it all figured out, some ancient artifact pops up and says, "Oh, really?" Think again, the Fuente Magna bowl is one of those curveballs. It's not just mysterious, it's downright maddening. It's the kind of discovery that leaves archaeologists scratching their heads and conspiracy theorists popping champagne. Imagine this. It's the 1950s, in a quiet village near Lake Titicaca, Bolivia. A local farmer is doing what farmers do, working his land, when he stumbles upon a strange, oversized stone bowl buried in the dirt. Now, this wasn't just some ordinary pottery you'd use to mix up a batch of stew. This thing was massive, intricately carved, and covered with symbols and strange writing. At first glance, you'd think it belonged in Mesopotamia. thousands of miles away, not in the highlands of South America. The farmer probably didn't realize he'd just uncovered one of the most controversial artifacts in history. In fact, legend has it that the bowl even spent some time as a pig trough before anyone recognized its potential significance. Yes, you read that right. This ancient relic may have been used to feed pigs. Eventually, the bowl made its way into the hands of local officials, and later into the Museum of Precious Metals in La Paz, where it sat quietly in storage for decades. At first, no one could make sense of it. The designs were beautiful. Anthropomorphic figures, animals, and symbols clearly tied to local Andean cultures. But mixed in with those familiar motifs was something completely out of place. Two types of writing. One was linked to the ancient Pucara culture, the forerunner of the Tiwanaku civilization. The other? Well, that's where things get wild. Some experts claimed the second script resembled Proto-Sumerian cuneiform, a form of writing that dates back over 5,000 years and comes from Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Imagine finding Egyptian hieroglyphs on a Mayan temple. That's the level of bizarre we're talking about here. Because of this, the Fuente Magna bowl earned a dramatic nickname, the Rosetta Stone of the Americas. If it's authentic, it suggests that there was contact between ancient Sumerians and the people of the Andes, civilizations separated by oceans, mountains, and thousands of miles. For years, the Fuente Magna sat collecting dust until two researchers, Bernardo Biados and archaeologist Freddy Arce, decided to investigate. Their search led them to a man named Maximiliano, who claimed the bowl once belonged to him. He had no idea it was priceless. Biados and Arce took detailed photographs of the bowl's inscriptions and sent them to Dr. Clyde Ahmed Winters, an expert in ancient languages. Dr. Winters compared the writing to ancient scripts from Africa, the Indus Valley, and Mesopotamia. His conclusion was astonishing. The writing wasn't just random decoration, it was Proto-Sumerian. In his published work, Winters even translated the text. According to his interpretation, the inscriptions were spiritual in nature, used during rituals to honor a goddess named Nia, who was associated with fertility and life. The text speaks of purity, blessings, and divine protection. It suggests that the bowl was part of sacred ceremonies designed to thank nature for its abundance and ensure the well-being of the community. The mention of Nia is especially intriguing because this goddess appears under different names across ancient cultures. In Greek mythology, she is associated with Neith, while in the Semitic world, she's linked to the goddess Anat. This connection hints at a shared spiritual tradition spanning continents. Now, this is where the story shifts from fascinating to almost unbelievable. If Dr. Winters is right, how on earth did Sumerian writing end up in Bolivia? One theory is that the Sumerians, skilled sailors with seaworthy ships, didn't just trade with nearby regions like the Indus Valley. Some of their ships may have ventured farther, rounding the southern tip of Africa and catching ocean currents that could carry them across the Atlantic to South America. Once there, they might have journeyed inland, eventually reaching the high-altitude regions around Lake Titicaca. If true, this suggests a global network of contact long before the age of Columbus, or even the Vikings. It also implies that the Sumerians influenced not only the religion of the Andean people, but possibly their language as well. In fact, some linguists have pointed out similarities between Proto-Sumerian and Aymara, a language still spoken in Bolivia today. Of course, not everyone is convinced. Skeptics like Jason Colavito argue that the resemblance between the bowl's writing and Proto-Sumerian script is superficial at best. He points out that the artifact's provenance is shaky. It wasn't found in a carefully documented archaeological dig, but rather by a farmer plowing his field. That, combined with its dramatic implications, makes it a prime candidate for a hoax. Colavito suggests that the inscriptions could be random markings, or even a modern forgery designed to attract attention. After all, history has seen its fair share of fake relics created to fool experts and tourists alike. Supporters of the bowl's authenticity, like Biados, counter these criticisms by pointing to the overwhelming support they've received from other researchers. They argue that dismissing the artifact without proper investigation is just as unscientific as blindly accepting it as genuine. Whether real or fake, the Fuente Magna bowl forces us to confront big questions about our past. If it's authentic, it challenges the narrative that ancient civilizations were isolated, developing independently in their respective corners of the globe. Instead, it suggests that people were crossing oceans and sharing ideas thousands of years earlier than we thought. Researcher Yuri Leverato captures the mystery perfectly, asking the curious question, how is it possible that Proto-Sumerian inscriptions were found in a bowl near Lake Titicaca, 3,800 meters above sea level, thousands of kilometers from the lands of the Sumerians? If the Sumerians did reach Bolivia, it changes everything we know about their culture and about the ancient people of South America. For now, the Fuente Magna bowl sits quietly in its museum home, like the other ancient artifacts, holding its secrets close. Ongoing research may eventually prove whether it's the smoking gun of ancient global travel or just a cleverly carved hoax. But either way, the story of the bowl captures the imagination. It reminds us that history is never truly settled, and that sometimes a single artifact can shake the very foundations of what we think we know. So, next time you come across an old bowl or piece of pottery, take a closer look. You never know, it might just rewrite history. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.